Okay, so the other day I was just surfing on the internet as I usually do, and I managed to stumble across this article, and it was about the one and only F-Zero franchise. And some interesting stuff was said about the possibility of a new F-Zero game. Now, the most recent F-Zero game, which is F-Zero GX, was released on the GameCube in 2003, so nearly 2 decades ago, and fans of the franchise have been patiently, or not so patiently, waiting for a new game. Over the years, many people have lost hope in the possibility of a brand new F-Zero game. However, recently,
Toshihiro Nagoshi,
who was a producer of F-Zero GX, spoke with Red Bull of France about how he's open to working on a new game in the series. And so in this video, I'm just going to be talking about this small segment of the interview, and along with that, I'll also talk about why it makes sense for an F-Zero game to release on the Switch. And with all that said, let's start the video. Alright, so the small part of the interview that has been translated from French to English reads as, putting aside the odds of it happening, I must admit I have a lot of affection for F-Zero GX. If the opportunity were to present itself, I wouldn't mind. And in that case, I'd like to make it a challenging game. I believe that if Nintendo just wants a racing game that is fun and accessible, they already have Mario Kart for that purpose. So there's quite a bit to talk about here, so let's get into it. The first thing we've got to look at is the fact that he says putting aside the odds of it happening, which basically means that a new F-Zero game is probably not going to happen, which really does suck. But then he says he has a lot of affection for F-Zero GX, which does give us a bit of hope that we might at least get an F-Zero GX port on the Switch. Then he says if the opportunity were to present itself, he wouldn't mind. So basically, if the higher-ups of Nintendo do ask him to work on a new F-Zero game, he wouldn't mind making one, which is good news. I think it's kinda weird that he just says that he wouldn't mind, as in the sentence right before this one, he talks about how he has a lot of affection for F-Zero GX. But then he didn't give a very direct or excited response, it's just that he wouldn't mind, which kinda makes it out to seem like he couldn't care less, which I'm sure is not the case, it's just how he managed to come off. Just like how F-Zero GX is said to be an extremely hard game, he says if he were to make a new game in the series that it would be challenging. For the final sentence he says, I believe that if Nintendo just wants a racing game that is fun and accessible, they already have Mario Kart for that. I think what he says here is great. He realizes there is already competition for a more accessible racing game, and so he's not entering an oversaturated market. As well as by saying this,
Nagoshi
is also sticking to the roots of the F-Zero series, as the games in general are known for their challenging, super fast-paced racing. And so knowing that if an F-Zero game does actually release on the Switch, that it will be similar to the games before it is a nice relief. Now that we're done with the interview, I'm going to talk about why it just makes sense for the F-Zero series to make a return on the Switch, with the first reason being that it will allow for literal generations of new players to experience an F-Zero game. A game in the series hasn't released in 17 freaking years, and so there are a lot of players who have never even touched an F-Zero game. And so it makes sense for Nintendo to tap into this market, which not only makes sense from a business standpoint, as it'll allow for a bunch of new people to buy the games, which will generate the money, but it's also great for the players, as we'll finally get a new F-Zero game. Now, F-Zero making a return to the Switch will be some much needed fan service. Now, Nintendo over the past year have done a fantastic job at pissing fans off, whether it be through the cancellation of multiple Smash Bros tournaments, or the extremely lazy port that is Super Mario 3D All-Stars, and so a nice way for them to come back from this would be to release an F-Zero game that pleases fans. Now, did Nintendo care about fan service? No, but they probably should start to care about it. Now on the Switch there are hundreds of different kart games, or maybe not hundreds, but there are definitely a lot. You've got the critically acclaimed Hello Kitty Cruisers, Rocket League, and Trials Rising to name just a few. These games all vary in subgenres of the karting genre, and on the Switch there is only one game that I know of that is in the same genre of kart games as F-Zero, with that being Fast RMX. And so it just makes sense for Nintendo to publish a game in a subgenre that doesn't have much competition, as it'll once again generate the money, as it has no competition, so people will have to buy it if they're interested in those type of games. And with all that said, it's the end of the video. The article I mentioned will be linked in the description, so feel free to give it a read, leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel for more Nintendo content, and yeah, I'll see you all later.